name is Jojo. Welcome to your gentle vinyasa practice. We'll get some deep stretching and hold some poses for several breaths, mostly low to the ground today. So let's go ahead and get started today in a child's pose. From kneeling, send your big toes towards each other and your knees out wide. Make sure your toes are untucked. Sit your hips back to your heels, stretch your arms out in front of you, and drop your head towards the ground. If your head doesn't reach the floor, you could take a bolster or a block underneath your head. You could also prop up your knees with a blanket. Bring a bolster or block between your sits bones and your heels. Whatever makes this pose feel like a comfortable rest. And if this pose, no matter what, feels like not a comfortable rest, then that's okay. Find a different pose. You could lie on one side in a fetal position or find a neutral seat with your eyes closed. Find something that feels like a rest, where you can divert your attention away from holding effort in your body. Relax the tension. Let your body just be and bring your awareness into your breath. Ask your mind, what am I thinking of? Acknowledge whatever that is just for a moment and then let it float on past on its way, rather than becoming attached to a thought that is not an awareness of doing your yoga on your mat. So any poses that I offer today, just know that those are suggestions, and you could always come to this resting pose or another resting pose at any point throughout the next hour. Your child's pose or some other rest is available to you at any time. You can take modifications at any time as well. If you've got props that you like to use, even if I don't name them specifically. As you tune into your breath here in your resting pose, become aware of your breath dropping all the way past your mouth, your jaw, your throat, even your shoulders and your upper chest, and dropping down into right in the middle of your rib cage. Let your lungs inflate and deflate like balloons. Take your inhales through your nose and your exhales out your mouth a few times, and then if you prefer it, you could seal your lips back up again and take a gentle Ujjayi breath, an oceanic breath in and out through your nose. You've got both options. You can switch between open and closed mouth exhales at any point. I like to start off a yoga class with an intention, since we move with intention and purpose. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about self-care and healing. If you've got an intention already in your brain, you can tune me out. This is just an offer. So healing begins with accepting that what we've gone through has changed us. And once we acknowledge that something has affected us, we can let go of the past, restore our faith in the future, and live with meaning and feeling in the present. And the last step is recognizing our intrinsic worth and value. So self-care is about loving all the different versions of you that have come before, accepting that each day you may be slightly different, but your value never changes. Your wholeness never changes. So celebrate growth, forgive mistakes, and know your worth. You are worthy. So while you're in your child's pose or a rest, imagine yourself as a child. Maybe you have a family photo in your head, a small child. Maybe you were 5 or 6. What did you look like? Envision your hair. What does that child's face look like? What are they wearing? And what would you say to this child if you could say something? Welcome that child with open arms to your mat and to your practice, your own inner child. From your child's pose, Alasana, or your modified child's pose, start to roll out your wrists. Maybe flip one palm to face up and then the other. Just giving your wrists a little extra love and care. And stop with your right palm facing up. Lift your head away from the ground, just come up about halfway, and then slide your right arm underneath you so it reaches over to the left. And drop your right shoulder blade down towards the ground. Maybe your right side of your face turns to the floor. You could come up to your left fingertips, look under your left arm. Breathe into your upper back and the spot between your scapula. Inhale, rise away from the floor, slide your right arm back out in front of you, and then turn your palms up and down. You could take them one at a time or both together, in and out. Roll out your wrists. And then turn your left palm up. Lift away from the floor, slide your left arm underneath you, reaching over toward the right. Drop down to your left shoulder and the side of your face. You could bring your right fingertips to the ground, raise up your arm, and then peek under your arm. Open up that spot between your shoulder blades. And lift up, slide the arm back out in front of you, and flip-flop the wrists a little bit. And now stretch your arms out in front of you, both palms facing down. Walk your hands over to the right edge of your mat. Keep your face pointing towards the ground. You could stack your left hand on top of your right. Stretch your left side out in a long, arcing line. Keep your hips and your chest pointing straight down towards the ground. Inhale, rise up, float through the center of your mat. Exhale, and walk your hands all the way across, over to the left. Option to stack your right hand on top of your left for greater sensation. Drop your head. If it doesn't reach the floor, that's all good. Let it be centered between your arms. Keep sitting your hips back toward your heels. Stretch your left side long. Inhale, lift up and come back through the center. Exhale, sink down. Take some more wrist flip-flops or rolls. And then use the heels of your hands on your inhale. Pull yourself up into a tabletop position on your hands and knees. Slide your knees so they are in line with your hips, and your feet come out in line with your knees. The tops of your feet on the ground. Inhale, let your belly hang down towards the ground like it's a hammock, and look up and out. Exhale, round your back. Open between your shoulder blades and tuck your chin towards your chest. Inhale, drop your belly, lift your heart, cow pose. Exhale, round your back. Open the back of your heart, drop your head, cat pose. Take another round, inhale to arch your back and lift your gaze. Exhale, round your back and tuck your head in between your arms. Inhale, come to a neutral tabletop position with a long, flat spine. Inhale, tuck your toes under. Exhale, lift your hips up into the air. Press the top of your mat away from you. So your tailbone points up. Lengthen through the backs of your legs. Let your heels sink down without your tailbone collapsing. Your tailbone points high. Your knees may be a little soft and your heels may float above the floor. That's okay. Spread your fingers, spread your toes. Let your head drop in between your arms as your spine finds length. Press away from the ground and your tailbone lifts. One more inhale. Exhale, drop back to your knees. Find your child's pose again. And roll out your wrists, or maybe you bend and straighten your fingers, flip-flop, one palm and then the other. And on your inhale, come back up to your tabletop position on your hands and knees. And line up your feet with your knees, so if you peeked between your knees, you couldn't see your feet. We're gonna start flowing with one breath to one movement. So your inhale takes you to your tabletop. Your exhale sinks your heels back down towards your hips. Find a modified child's pose. Drop your elbows, let your head fall. Inhale, rise right back up to your tabletop position on your hands and knees, flat back. Exhale, tuck your toes, lift your hips, downward facing dog. Look like the letter V, tipped upside down. Inhale, drop your knees, tabletop position, rock into alignment, your shoulders over your wrists, untuck your toes. Exhale, child's pose, tip your hips back towards your heels. Inhale, tabletop, flat back. Exhale, tuck your toes, lift your hips, downward facing dog. Inhale, drop your knees, rock forward, tabletop, untuck your toes. Exhale, child's pose, rock your hips back. Last time through, inhale, lift up to your tabletop. Exhale, shoot your hips up into the air, downward facing dog. Inhale, drop your knees. Exhale, child's pose, rock your hips back, and then stay in your child's pose. And give your wrists and your forearms a little bit of TLC, whatever that means to you. Rolling out, flip-flopping. And use your hands to pull yourself up to your tabletop position. Extend your right leg out behind you, lift your foot, bend your knee, flex your foot so your heel is pointing up towards the sky. We're gonna take 10 little pulses here, like you're gonna try to kick the ceiling up, right? Kick a ceiling tile in. So begin your little pulses and feel your glutes squeeze every time your heel lifts. About 10 times we're gonna do it. So let's take our last 3, last 2, last 1. Good, now on your inhale, extend your leg. Point your toes, lift your leg, arch your back like your cow pose. Exhale, bend your knee like your cat pose with one leg. Tuck your knee towards your nose, curl up. Inhale, extend your leg back and lift your heart. Exhale, round your back, tuck your knee towards your nose. Inhale, lift your leg, open your chest. Exhale, knee to nose. Then step your foot all the way up to the top of your mat. Find a little extra length through your left hip flexor. So I made a little adjustment by walking my back knee further back, or you could walk your front toes a little further forward. Let that leg trail out behind you. Then keep your left hand on the ground. Inhale, extend your right arm up into the air. Maybe it even, like you're doing the backstroke, travels back and reaches toward the back of your mat. Option to bend your left knee so your toes come up and point into the air. And if you stay right here, you stay right here. This is awesome. You could also, if it's available, grab onto that foot with your hand and open up through your chest and lengthen the top of your quadriceps, top of your thigh. Take another inhale. On your exhale, release. Take your foot and both hands down to the ground and sweep your right knee back in line with your left. Find your tabletop position again on your hands and knees. Stack your shoulders over your wrists and your hips over your knees. Extend your left leg out into the air behind you, then bend your knee, flex your foot so your heel is pointing up into the air. And like you're gonna kick in a ceiling tile, start to pulse that heel up. Each time that you pulse, squeeze your glute to make it happen. We're just doing an estimate here. About 10 seconds. So this is maybe your last 3, last 2. Squeeze that glute for 1. And extend your leg, point your toes, lift your heart. Inhale. Exhale, bend your knee, tuck your nose towards your knee. Inhale, lift your leg, open your heart. Exhale, bend your knee, tuck it in towards your nose. Inhale, extend. Exhale, knee to nose. And then step your foot to the top of your mat. Make your adjustment for some extra length in your right hip flexor. So that right leg trails out behind you. Keep the top of your foot rooting down to the floor. Keep your right hand on the ground. Inhale, sweep your left arm high. Maybe even start to do the backstroke and extend your arm back behind you. From here, maybe you want to bend your back knee so your toes come up. These are all options and offerings. You could, if it's available, grab onto your back foot. Roll your top shoulder down your back. Take another breath in. Exhale, release your foot and both hands to the ground and send your left knee back to meet your right. Option for a little movement, you could sway your hips or take some more cat-cows, or you could find your child's pose and roll out your wrists. Whatever feels like a release. And find your way back into your tabletop position. Step your right foot forward. Then make that adjustment for some extra length through your left hip flexor. If you've got blocks, you could take blocks under your hands here, or you could rise up to your fingertips on the floor. Long spine. Shoot the crown of your head up and out. Now tuck your back toes, walk your hands or your blocks backwards. Straighten out your right leg as you go. Depending on where you're at today, you may sit your hips back onto your back heel, or they may float a little away from that heel. Either option is great. Lengthen out through the back of your right leg. Root down through your heel and flex your foot. Keep on breathing. Breathe into your back. Avoid crunching the back of your neck. So if you're trying to look straight out in front of you, maybe you turn your gaze toward the top of your mat. Lengthen the back of your neck. Drop your right toes to the ground and walk your hands or your blocks forward. Come back to that low lunge and untuck your toes. Drop the top of your foot to the ground. Now you've got a couple different options here to raise up a little higher. If raising up away from the floor isn't for you, hey, that's fine. You can stay with your hands on blocks or on the floor. To raise up a little higher, start by lifting your chest. Maybe interlace your fingers and drop your palms onto your thigh. Start with a lifting motion and then send your heart forward to avoid pinching your back. You've still got this lift. From here, maybe you want to experiment with lifting your arms. You could bend your arms to 90 degrees and lift your chest as your elbows travel towards each other for a cactus arm back bend. If you're craving even more heart opening with a little balance challenge, take your arms behind you and bind them. Interlace your fingers together. Straighten your elbows, point your fists toward the ground, and open up your chest. Keep that lifting and then the opening. If you wobble or catch yourself with a hand, it is okay. Just keep on breathing. Get back when you're ready. Or find a different option if you're in the middle of something and you realize it's no longer serving you. Take your last breath in here. And then on your exhale, release your hands down to the floor or to blocks. On your inhale, rise up again. And then drop your right hand towards the ground. Lift your left arm up and over. So your fingertips may come to the ground. If you've got a block, you could walk it back a little. So your right arm is in line with your hip, pointing straight towards the ground. Sweep your left arm up and over. Stretch out through your left side while still maintaining the position of your legs. Your front knee stacks over your front ankle. Your hips rock forward to allow extra space for your left hip flexor. Inhale, sweep up. Exhale, drop both hands. Now take your your right hand and place it onto the top or the inside of your thigh. Let your thigh rock away from you. Roll onto the blade of your foot, the outside edge. So your leg comes further away from you. And turn your chest towards the leg as the leg comes out and away. Roll your right shoulder down your back. Inhale, come back through center. Your knee tucks in, drop both hands. Exhale and swing your right knee back in line with your left. Pass through a child's pose just for a moment. Sink your hips back or find a resting pose. And tune into your sensation in your hips. Your hips may be a spot that holds onto a lot of not only physical tension, but also some emotions maybe bubbling up, whether that's frustration or sadness. Whatever it is, just continue to breathe. We're accessing things in the body. We might even be activating a little bit. And that's okay. Soothe your nervous system. Remind yourself you're here on your mat. You're in your yoga class. It's just yoga, y'all. Come back to your tabletop position on your hands and knees. And step your left foot forward in between your hands. And find some extra room for your hip flexors to flare open. So that back leg may come a little further back. Find some extra room. Make sure that your front knee continues to stack over your ankle without tipping further past it. If you've got blocks, take those under your hands. If you've got fingertips on the floor, rise until you're buoyant on your fingertips. Now tuck your back toes under and walk your hands or your blocks back. Tip your hips back. Straighten out your left leg. So you could sit your hip all the way back to your heel if that's available to you, or you could have your hips floating away from your heel. Either option's great. Focus on the sensation in your left leg, your hip. Flex your foot and root your heel down for greater sensation in your calf. Make sure the back of your neck remains long and there's no pinching in your upper back or your neck. Rock your hips into one line. So you might even take your left hip and slide it just a little further back as your right hip comes forward. And now drop the toes, bend the knee, and walk your hands or your blocks forward. Untuck your back toes. Touch the top of your right foot to the mat. Now, if this is enough sensation for you right here to start opening up your heart, the spot around your collarbones, your sternum, this is great. If you'd like to experiment with coming further away from the floor, then lift your hands. Maybe you start by interlacing your fingers, drop your palms to your thigh. Lift up first and out second. Maybe you want to challenge your balance a little further, lift your arms higher, bend your elbows, and lift your heart as your elbows travel back. Maybe you want to bind your hands, interlace your fingers behind you, press your palms together, and straighten your elbows. If you find an option and it's no longer serving you, then explore, find a different option. Keep the hips rocking forward and both hip creases pointing toward the top of your mat. Inhale, last time. Exhale, drop your hands to blocks or the floor. Come back to your low lunge. Now lift your hands again. Drop your left arm down to the left. Lift your right arm into the air. So your left fingertips may find a block. You could walk that block back, or they may just graze the floor, or they may just be pointing down. Keep your legs stable and your hips still pointing toward the top of your mat. Lift up and out through your right side. One more inhale. Exhale, drop both hands. Now take your left hand to the inside of your thigh and let your foot roll onto the edge. Press gently to the inside of your thigh or your knee to roll your left hip open. And then turn your chest up and out to the left. Your left shoulder rolls down your back. Inhale, release, exhale, and swing your left knee back. And then come to your child's pose, quiet your hips, or find your resting pose. And come back to your breath, tune into your breath. Rather than shying away from sensation in your hips, breathe into it. Send your breath to where you feel most in your physical body. Rise back onto your hands and knees in your tabletop position. Now you've got two options for what's ahead. So you can start by experimenting with cow face pose, and if it doesn't suit you, you can move into a different seat. For cow face pose, take your right knee and wrap it around the front of your left knee. Wing your feet out to the sides. Use your hands to walk yourself back. Drop your sits bones onto the ground. Come to a seated position. So one leg is crossed over the other. Your knees are close. You can flex your feet so the outside edges of your feet come down to the ground. If this is absolutely not happening for you today, that is okay. You can find your fire log pose and stack your shins like they're making an equal sign. So one foot on top of the other, thigh. And if that's not happening for you today or that causes pain, that's okay too. You can find a comfortable cross-legged seat with that leg out in front, and just take note which leg is over the top so that when we go to the other side, you can even out. If you're in your cow face pose, then you want to roll both sits bones down toward the ground. It may not quite reach. You could take a blanket or a rolled up blanket or towel and slide it underneath your right hip, if that makes the pose a little more accessible. Trying to sit down equally onto both sides. Now, wherever you are in your seat, take your right arm up and over, give yourself a pat on the back. Then take your left hand, use it as a gentle guide. Draw your elbow a little in further, just a little. So if you feel a yank or a tug, then release it. Just stretching out through your right tricep, finding some extra length in your tricep. Keep your head and your spine lifted so you're not curling up into a little ball here. And then relax your grip. Take both arms down. Now take your left arm, bend the elbow, turn your palm to face backwards, and slide your arm across your low back. Take your other hand, wrap it around a wrist or a hand, and again, very gently, draw that hand a little further across your body, stretching out through your left shoulder. So your left arm is squeezing in and across the small of your back. Now we're going to combine these two, so leave your left arm across your back. You may even walk your hand up a little further so it's pointing up. Take your other arm, wrap it around and down, and your fingertips reach for each other. And mine are not touching each other right now. That's okay. If you want to just grab onto your shirt, if you've got a strap, you could grab both sides of a strap. Maybe it's just one arm crossed and the other arm patting your back, and that's fine. You could, if your fingers are available, grab a hold, one set of fingers with the other, and curl them around each other. Keep your spine lifting tall. Relax your shoulders away from your ears. Take another breath in, and then on your exhale, release. And roll your shoulders in some big circles, forward or back, doesn't matter, your choice. Maybe you roll out your wrists too, your choice. Now either grab onto your ankles if you're in your cow face pose, or you could take your fingertips to the floor in front of you if you're in another seat. On your inhale, lift your spine tall. On your exhale, hinge at your hips and take a fold. And you might not go very far, and that's okay. If your fold is in your practice, you could release your ankles and walk your hands out in front of you. Relax your neck. If you're mostly just sitting up tall here, maybe it just happens with the back of your neck. You drop your chin towards your chest, that's great. Keep on breathing. Send your breath to where you feel the sensation most. Inhale to rise back up to a tall spine. Exhale and rock back, plant your hands, and then extend your legs and kick them out. Yeah. Just kick out your feet or roll out your hips, your knees. And then relax. Take your feet down to the floor and bring your left leg comes out in front of you. Take your right foot, plant the sole of your foot to the inside of your left leg. Draw your hip back and open up your hips, bend your knee. Then turn so your shoulders are coming into line with your hips a little bit. So your right knee is kind of traveling back, and then that right shoulder turns the same direction as your knee. Your left shoulder is kind of coming out towards your left foot. So you may scoot your hip back a little more, just finding some extra room. Then walk your left hand down the mat towards your foot and reach your right arm up into the air. Keep your right hip rolling open so your knee is traveling towards the floor. It may not come all the way down, but engage that glute, roll the hip open and out so the knee comes down. Your toes are never your only goal here, but maybe you start to envision that your right hand is reaching your left toes. Maybe you even touch. If it's available, you can grab onto your toes and keep your shoulders one stacking directly over the other so your chest is pointing to the side rather than rolling towards the floor. Inhale, release, sweep up all the way back to your tall spine. Plant your right hand to the ground, roll onto your right knee, lift your hips. For your stargazer pose, reach your left arm up and over. Open up your chest, lift your hips, and drop back down. Find your seat, extend both legs out in front of you. And then either roll onto one hip or cross your legs and find your hands on the floor. Come back to your tabletop position on your hands and knees. And this time cross your left knee in front of your right knee. Wing your feet out wide to the sides. Walk your hands back, sit your hips down. Try to get both sits bones down to the ground. If you've got a blanket to make this happen, to even out, you could slide that underneath. Try to roll both sits bones down. If your cow face pose is not happening for you today, that's fine. Extend your left hip. Bring those hips a little wider and then stack into your fire log pose, one leg over the other, or take your cross leg seat with your left leg crossing over. If you're in your cow face pose, maybe you want to flex your feet a little extra to root down through the blades of your feet on the floor. And take your left arm up and over, give yourself a pat on the back, hand to elbow. Gently draw the elbow in a little closer to the midline of your body. Keep your spine lifting tall. Stretch out your left tricep. And let your rib cage rise away from your hips. One more inhale. Exhale to release. Draw your right arm across your back, palm facing behind you. Grab a hold of a wrist or a hand. Draw the arm across your back. Keep your shoulders down away from your ears. Now keep your right hand and right arm across your back and take your left arm up and over. You could draw your fingertips a little closer. If they don't reach, it's okay. Grab onto your shirt or pat your back. Find a spot that feels like a good stretch without being overwhelming or sharp. Nice tall spine. Lift up for one more inhale. Exhale, drop both arms and roll your shoulders, maybe your wrists. Take your shoulders forward or back, maybe both. Switch it up. And find your stillness. If you're in your cow face pose, you can grab onto ankles or take your hands to the floor in front of you. Inhale, lift up. Exhale, hinge at your hips. You may not go very far. Maybe you just take this less from your hips and more from your neck, just dropping your chin. Maybe it's just a tilt. It's okay. Breathe into the sensation where you feel it most. Anything that bubbles to the surface, allow it, accept it, welcome it to your practice as a messenger. Lift back up to your tall spine, inhale. Exhale, take your hands back behind you, reach your legs out in front of you, and then wiggle or kick, wobble, whatever movement feels best. Bring some fresh oxygen back into the bloodstream. And then extend your legs out in front of you. Keep your right leg extended, your sit bone rooting down. Bring your left heel in towards your groin or towards the inside of your thigh. Make an adjustment so you walk your left hip back a little further, giving yourself some more room, and take your shoulders so they're in line as well. So your left shoulder is pointing toward where your knee is pointing. Your right shoulder is pointing toward where your right toes are. Walk your right hand or slide your right hand down towards your foot. Reach your left arm high into the air. Keep both sits bones rooting down. So this may create some extra length in your left hip. Breathe into your left side. Your toes are never the main goal, but maybe you start to envision your top hand reaching down towards your right toes. If you do grab a hold, keep your chest taking out to the side rather than collapsing toward the ground. Inhale, sweep all the way up. Take your left hand to the floor. Exhale, push your hips away from the ground. Rise up to your knee. And lift your right arm. Maybe open your chest for your stargazer pose. Sink back down to the ground. Send both legs out in front of you. You may even want to move the fleshy part of your buttocks so that you can feel your sits bones. These two ischial tuberosities, your bones that you sit on. You can feel them rooting down. And flex your feet so you root down through your heels. Avoid rooting through the backs of your knees. It's going to be a lot less stable. Take your fingertips to the floor. Inhale, lift up your spine long. Exhale, send your heart towards your toes, soft knees. Walk your hands out in front of you and fold forward. Hinge at your hips. Keep your spine long. Avoid looking straight out in front of you as this might crunch the back of your neck. Let your gaze turn down toward the top of your mat or your shins. Maybe you grab a hold of whatever's available. Your shins, your ankles, your feet. Keep your knees soft and your belly coming out towards your thighs, maybe even laying your belly gently on top of your thighs. And breathe. Take note of what's happening in your pelvis, your hips and glutes. Breathe into your low back. Drop your hands, release whatever you're holding on to, both physically and mentally. Drag or walk your hands back up towards your hips, come to a tall spine. Cross your legs or roll onto one hip. Find your tabletop position on your hands and knees. Slide your right knee all the way up until it nestles into your right wrist. Then flip your toes over so they point off to the left. Walk your left knee further back. Drop into your half pigeon, Ekapada Raja Kapotasana. I love saying that. So if you've got a rolled up blanket or a towel and your right hip is really floating high, even a block, you could take something underneath and feel as you sink some pressure on your blanket or your block. Make sure your back toes are untucked and your foot isn't sickled so it's in a straight line. Your hips both point in the same direction, like your hip creases are headlights illuminating the way. They both point straight. You could fold a little further, maybe walk your hands out, come to your forearms. You could hang onto a block, maybe take your forehead down to a block. Sometimes it can be a challenge in a static pose where there's deep sensation to stay present. And the challenge is as much a mental one as it is a physical one. Anytime you start to lose your connection to your breath or your body, see if you can turn your attention inward, find your greatest sensation, breathe into it, send your breath there, and focus on your breath and your body. Let those thoughts that crop up just float on past, acknowledge, thank them, and then let them go. If you came down, bring your hands back to the ground. Walk your back knee in a little closer until you can put some weight onto it. Flip your right toes to face the back of your mat, slide your knee back and come into your tabletop position. And then maybe you want to wiggle your hips, take some cat-cows, come to your child's, take a little breather, whatever that means to you. Find your way back to your tabletop and slide your left knee up until it nestles into your wrist. Flip your left toes over towards the right edge of your mat. Walk your right knee further back and then untuck your toes and drop the top of your foot. Lengthen through your right hip flexor and your left glute. If you've got a towel or blanket or even a block, you could take it underneath your left glute so you feel where you're sinking down, exerting some pressure onto the block or the blanket. Letting the floor rise up a little bit to meet you. And if you'd like to come down a little further, you could drop to your forearms, maybe even drop your forehead to a block or to the ground. And breathe. Always continuing to breathe deep. Anytime you lose your connection to it, just know that you are still breathing and find it, tune into it. Take some svadhyaya, some self-study about the quality of your breathing. Avoid judgment words like good or bad. Try to think, analyze in quality words like light or heavy, still or fidgety, maybe moving, buzzy or dull. Whatever that means, but avoid putting a good or bad with that. So just because something is heavy, that doesn't mean it's good, that doesn't mean it's bad, it means it's heavy. Because something is bright, well, that doesn't mean it's good or bad, it means it's bright. Use your imagination as you tune into your sensation. Avoid judgment and just use your observation. If you came down, bring your hands back to the ground. Then walk your back knee in a little closer until you can lift your hips and bring some weight into your knee and slide your other toes back. And line up your knees, find your tabletop. And then come into a seated position, drop your hips to one side, bring your legs out in front of you. And roll all the way down onto your back. Let your soles of your feet come towards each other and the blades of your feet rest on the floor. Let your hips roll open and your knees come open, creating a diamond shape with your legs. Rest one hand on your belly and the other on your heart. Let your elbows broaden. Soften your shoulders toward the ground. Supta Baddha Konasana, bound ankle pose. Feel your breath as it moves through you. First, your hand on your belly. You may feel your belly inflating. And then your chest. That hand on your chest may rise a fraction. And then it releases belly and chest. Soften your face, your eyebrows, your jaw. Take your hands to your knees and draw your knees together. Lift your feet and lightly flex your feet. So your footprints are going to stamp onto the ceiling. You can keep your knees soft. Your spine roots down and lengthens out across the mat. If you feel a little shake in your legs, that's perfectly normal. Maybe you want to find some movement here. You could make little figure eights with your feet in the air. So your hips roll in a figure eight formation against the floor. Let sensation drain out through the bottoms of your feet. And let your legs grow light and bright. Bend your knees and draw your knees into your chest. Give yourself a loving hug. When you're ready, release. Extend your legs toward the top of your mat. Let your feet flop open. Rest your arms by your sides. Turn your palms to face up. Take your shoulders away from your ears. If you've got a different variation that would make this final rest a little more comfortable for you, then by all means take that. You could prop up your knees, cover yourself with a blanket. Find a place where you'll be comfortable for several minutes. Any last remaining areas of tension, send your breath there. Use your breath to cleanse. Shut your eyes, or at least turn your gaze down toward the tip of your nose and soften your eyelids. Breathe deep. Relax your physical body. Let it sink down into the floor. Remember that child that you pictured at the beginning of class. Envision yourself as a child again. Remember what you were wearing and how your hair looked, what you were doing. Just this small child that is you. Welcome that child to your practice. Send some love to that child. Now envision yourself 10 years ago. Your 10 years ago self. What were you doing? What did your hair and clothes look like? Are you in the middle of something? Are you smiling? Are you frowning? That person that that 10 years ago you person. Open your arms to them and welcome them to your practice. Envision yourself 5 years ago now. What were you doing 5 years ago? What did you look like? That 5 years ago person. Hold them in your mind's eye. Who are they? What are they thinking? Show some love and acceptance to that 5 years ago person. Welcome them to your practice. Envision yourself 1 year ago. What does 1 year ago you look like? What were they doing? What were they thinking? Hold them in your mind's eye, that 1 year ago person. Let your heart radiate towards that 1 year ago person. Open your arms and welcome them to your practice. Imagine yourself 1 month ago. What does that 1 month ago person look like? What are they thinking? What are they feeling? What are they doing? See your 1 month ago person. Show them some compassion. Open your arms and welcome them to your practice. Look at yourself yesterday. See what you wore yesterday. Look into your 1 day ago person's eyes. Welcome them to your practice. Envision yourself right now, without opening your eyes or turning your gaze. Envision what you look like in this moment, your body lying on the floor, on your mat, in this room, right now. What does your right now person look like or feel like? Imagine opening your arms to that right now person and welcoming that right now person into your practice. Now welcome yourself, your full self, all yourselves. The child, the 10 year ago, the 5 year ago, the 1 year ago, 1 month, yesterday, right now, and even the future self. Welcome them all to your mat. Begin to awaken back into your sensation in your body. Keep your eyes closed or downturned. Just start to bring sensation back. Send sensation all the way down your arms and legs, into your fingers and toes. Wiggle your fingers and toes. Bring some little movements back. And roll your ankles and your wrists. Take a long body stretch with your arms over your head. And hug your knees to your chest. Roll over onto your side and find a fetal position. Option to use your bottom arm as a pillow underneath your head. Let this fetal position signify your rebirth, your restart. Now, in any way that feels most comfortable, rise up into a comfortable seat. You could use your hands to press yourself up. Find your comfortable seat. If that is sitting on a blanket or a bolster, find that and take it underneath you. Sit up tall with a long spine. Bring your hands together. Plug your thumbs into your sternum for your Anjali Mudra. Your hands at prayer at heart center. Shut your eyes or turn your gaze down to your fingertips. We end every yoga class with a simple acknowledgement of the light around us. The light and love in me honors the light and love in you. Together we bow and say namaste. Namaste. Thank you for joining me. My name is Jojo. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Please drink water, stay hydrated. If you need to journal, tune in every once in a while throughout the day to the sensation in your body, what your energy feels like. Thanks for joining me and sharing your practice with me today. Namaste.